Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards, where no ship is safe from being taken down to its nuts and bolts.
Nope, I won't do it. You can't make me. What do you mean you can make me? Wait, I have a contract? Let me see that. Oh, shit. You can make me. Well, f*** you too and that weird 8-legged thing you rode in on. God damn it. Fine. If I have to do this, I'm going to do it my way. Now f*** off. Alright, this episode is... Sorry. I just threw up in my mouth a little. This episode's going to be a little, unpleasant for all of us. But we're going to start it a little differently, just for the sake of having some fun along the way, I guess. Maybe, possibly, who knows, we'll see. Anyways, in Earth, Terran, terrestrial history, during one of those many big war things that you squishy humans keep getting into over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, one of the people trying to kill the other people were trying to bomb some place across an ocean or something somewhere. I don't know. It's really not important to me. The important part is that the end product of this general purpose mishigas that y'all just cannot get rid of is something called the B-17 Flying Fortress. Again, if y'all aren't a military geek like me, because, I have to keep up with this stuff, because who knows what's going to show up on my docks, that is one of the most famous bombers in human terrestrial Earth-type history up until this point. Mostly because it was a goddamn tank. And yes, it was a flying tank. In fact, it was a flying fortress. Oh, that's why they named it that, wasn't it? Right. Okay, anyways, the aircraft of this type were responsible for dropping literally over half the bombs that one of those people in that war dropped on those other people in that war. Just one class, and they fielded a whole lot of other different bombers along the way. I mean, this is just one item, and they had a lot of other bombers, and still, this one accounted for over half the bombs. And on top of that, it didn't just have bombs. This thing had 13 guns on it. 13! It's a bomber. It's supposed to let go of large metal cylinders that are filled with explosives that fall by way of gravity hopefully on top of the intended targets. And on top of that, it had 13 guns. Okay. And apparently it was just obscenely durable. There are stories of it coming back without tails, without significant segments of its wings, without engines, without whole chunks of it. In fact, there is a story of one of these coming back without a crew. Apparently it landed and stopped without a single person on board. Now, I mean, that warms the cockles of my, whatever passes for my heart. But still, that's kind of a beefy little chunky monster of an aircraft. In fact, the what are they called? City, state, district, nation, country, that thing. In fact, the country that was trying to keep the B-17 from dropping its so primitive bombs on it actually had to develop some purpose-built aircraft to try and bring these stupid things down. They had to specifically design deliberate things that only existed to knock B-17s out of the sky. And even then, they were only middlingly successful. In fact, the concept of the Flying Fortress was so significant upon the culture that developed them. There's not only the Flying Fortress, there's also the Super Fortress and the Strata Fortress. Because I guess the idea just kind of caught at some point. Anyways. Unfortunately, that leads us up to... Sorry, just threw up a little more again. That brings us up to the... I'll get it out. Just give me a second. That brings us up to the Star Fortress. You know what? I'm just going to call it the Resistance Bomber because calling it by its apparent designation and actual name is a goddamn insult to the aircraft that came before it. because it is a hot, steaming pile of shit, and whoever designed it should be ashamed of themselves. I don't even know where to start with this utter monstrosity. I guess I should start from the outside and work my way into the most offensive thing. Fine. Yes, like I said, the B-17 had 13 guns. That's because it had a chin turret. It had 2 cheek gun mounts. It had an upper ball turret. It had a lower ball turret. It had 2 waist guns. It had a tail gun. And it had a ventral gun sticking up out of the radio position. And I think it had a few more things riding around in random places all over the place. Basically, it was covered in guns pointing in every possible direction because it was trying to defend itself from fighters and interceptors knocking it down. It makes sense. It's a big target that's about to drop a lot of bombs on its intended target, and its intended target would very much prefer that didn't happen, so it sent up aircraft to try and prevent that from happening. Right. All tracks so far. And then we get to the Resistance bomber. Depending on who you talk to, because like with all things Star Wars, they can't be goddamn consistent, the Resistance bomber has between 2 and 3 turrets. One of them is on the bottom aft corner of the ventral fin, for lack of a better word. One of them is on the very tail of the spacecraft, and in fact that's where most of the spacecraft's guns are, is pointing dead aft. And then there might or might not be one on the spine/dorsal section of the ship. Now, in fairness, it does have, like, between 4 and 6 more guns, but they're all fixed. They're all fixed firing forward. On a bomber. Aside from some notable exceptions like the B-26, for example, that was purpose-built to be a ground attack aircraft, you don't see much strafing from strategic bombers. So why are we fixing the guns forward? You're going to get attacked by TIEs. You're totally going to get attacked by a lot of TIEs. They're going to be coming from every conceivable direction. So why are all your turrets facing backwards? Just backwards. Just backwards. You're flying towards the enemy. He's launching TIEs at you. The first thing they're going to do is shoot you as they fly past you from the front. What were you idiots thinking? And yes, I know the turrets can turn and engage TIEs and blah, 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 so on and so forth, but why isn't there a turret on the front? Why are there any fixed guns at all? What is the point of it? It is a bomber. It's not supposed to be getting in a dogfight. It's supposed to be trying to keep these things away from it so it can deliver its... Oh God. This is the bad part. Okay, deep breaths. Right. Moving on. Like I said, this thing is a bomber. And 90+% of bombers in the Star Wars universe use some variant of a proton torpedo. They're not bombers so much as they are torpedo craft, in that they launch a somewhat large, somewhat heavy, but very, very powerful rocket-propelled missile that goes and chases down its target and tries to destroy it. Pretty straightforward, given that we're talking about space combat and targets move. Well, technically, the Resistance bomber does technically use a variant of the proton torpedo as well, in that the variant is basically just the warhead of the proton torpedo. It has no guidance or propulsion or anything else attached to it. It's just the warhead. So how does it get to its target? You're probably asking right about now. And the answer is the bomber drops it out of the bottom part of that ventral fin. Yeah, the bottom part. Yeah, I know we're in space. Yeah, I know there's basically no gravity. Yeah, I know that if you're flying at the target, you should be firing the guns at the target, not down. Yes, I know that having to wait until you can drop your payload until you're directly over the target is blinking stupid in space. But here's the thing. George Lucas, in his infinite wisdom, initially conceived of the Star Wars universe as basically being the resistance from the war that spawned the B-17 against the bad guys in the war that spawned the B-17. And he wanted Star Wars space combat to basically be dogfights in space with all of the associated gravity-related details involved, like banking and so on and so forth. Well, the good news is up until right at this point, people had not taken that too ridiculously far. And then they did. If you've got a bomb bay that can no shit hold 1,048 proton bombs, you've got a bomb bay that could probably hold 100 proton torpedoes that could be fired forward out of the ship so it doesn't have to fly over another ship to drop its blinking bombs. And that's even without even getting into the detail that these things are fratricidal bastards, and apparently if you are able to shoot one while it's still loaded with all of its bombs, it will blow up with enough force to take out all of its goddamn wingmates. By the way, this was not a design feature of the Flying Fortress. They didn't do that. Seriously, about the only way you could effectively use a resistance bomber is by suicide running this thing into the target, except it's so silly slow that you couldn't even do that. They were utter wastes. They were atmospheric intergravity well bombers that's all they could do. And why would you use that in space? Especially given that they weren't actually designed for atmospheric use. I get that George Lucas wanted to have dogfights in space. I totally do. There have to be limits, lest you shit all over your fan base by insulting their intelligence and utterly destroying their I believe button with your stupid f***ing proton bombs out of the goddamn bottom of the f***ing ship.
And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube. Have a good day.